Skip Beebe, interviewed by Michaela Pearson.
Hi, Skip.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming in today.
It's my honor.
I see from your paperwork that you have lived in Waterford and Westbrook, also in Connecticut.
In the past, yes, I lived in
Where were you born?
L&M Hospital in 1947.
And where did you grow up?
In Waterford for the first 5-6 years of my life, and then went to Florida for about 8 months. And my mother remarried and came back to Rogers Lake.
So you grew up mostly around the Rogers Lake area? And all
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So tell me one of your earliest memories of Rogers Lake.
I think the earliest memory for me is coming to a new place, and I met a young man or kid my age. We became best friends, George King Security, and we went everywhere together, and we were inseparable, and his mom was my second mom. So that's very special. Can I expand that out just a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah.
I think one of the interesting things that we did at that time that oh my God, this is wrong. There was a right away, a couple houses down, and okay, go swimming, but come home for lunch. Or they'd yell for us and say, come home. And he never worried about what was going to happen. We'd go down to the up at Rogers Lake. When you come across the bridge, there was a summer camp owned by Mr. Belanek, who lived on the other corner. And we'd ask him if he had permission to go play baseball. And again, we would go up there for a good, deal of time before we came home and ride the bike around Rogers Lake. So there was not the, oh my God, you can't go farther than 5 feet from your home. One thing that opens my mind really wide is when we go to school, we go to school unless it was 4, 6, 8 inches of snow. But we have to walk to the end of the Pin Oak Trail, which was 500, 600, 700 feet from home, and we can't do that today. We have to have a guard to take care of us. So that early years were really pretty informative. I came from a family that didn't have a lot, but as I explained to everybody, I had a roof over my head, I had a doctor, and I had food. And my mom stayed home, didn't work. As I found out when I was 13, she was an alcoholic. And they took her to the hospital, and Dad came home and said she's probably not coming home. Obviously, to a 7, 8-year-old that doesn't even know what alcoholism is, that was a hard blow. Fortunately, she did live, but unfortunately, she was never as good as she had been before that. So those are, the early memories of Rogers Lake. Something to plug into it. When we were told how there was no school, a siren would blow at 7 o'clock in the morning. I think it was one blast. I think it might have been 3 blasts, which is at the entrance to Rogers Lake, and I think the siren is even still there. That also gave us, I wasn't a fireman at the time, but the firemen, they blow 21, and that would tell you somewhere in town where that particular fire was.
So that would be 2 blasts on the horn and then followed by a 1?
Yes.
So it would be like 2 and then a pause?
Right. And that's what it is at Rogers Lake down here in the center of town. There was a horn that did simultaneously, and down in South End as well. Which is, quite different today than it was then. So, proceeding on, what I'm trying to do is come out of Rogers Lake, kind of down Boston Post Road, to things that I remember, because south of Congregational Church, other than a couple places, I had never been. It hadn't been until I was probably driving. And we'll discuss that in a minute. But so going down, from Rogers Lake onto Post Road, where Zellick Electric was Sam Carbone's. They were a colored family that had quick shop for getting gas and bread and cigarettes and the like. And then he went up to Gus Heater's house or building, which was now Coffee's. And that was a light building, but shortly after that, the Coffees moved in from Midwest somewhere. And as they grew, you know, from a little store with cigarettes and milk, they started serving some food. And then the building over time, there was a laundromat and a cassette tapes and a television store in its life. Going down the road to where All Pro was, there was another gas station and service station. And I'll mention on the way, on the other side of the road, was an old colonial house, probably about 1960. They took it and put it down in Florence Griswold's property. If you went into their main entrance, it's a house on the left-hand side.
The brown one?
Yeah, the brown one. What I thought was really neat, that they could take a building that far even. One of the things to back up, I can remember times on Rogers Lake when we I didn't, but others drove cars on a lake because it was 18, 20 inches of ice. And so it was, again, in the wintertime, that was pretty neat. You know, proceeding down the Post Road, there were the next gas station. There was one that I think was there before where I live now, but across from Queenie Court is where I live. In the building across from me was Bill Trickman's station. And it was the first gas I'd ever bought as a kid. And I think the gas was about 22 cents a gallon. And he was a member of the fire department. And I remember that because we used to go to New London and we get gas for 99 cents a gallon. So it tells you where we've come since then. You know, continuing down Boston Post Road, there was another gas station at Beckwith Lane. And then you really get down to things that I remember being told about, that the Bee and Thistle did not sit there originally. It was like 50 feet off the road, which is must have been a task whenever they did that. And with that, well, I remember as a fireman, we had a fire in it and we couldn't find out where it started. And it was in a baking oven. It was sitting on a floor on tiles. And we were getting smoke out of the third story trim. And it was because it was a balloon framing. So we spent a couple hours there trying to figure out without destroying the building. The other fire I remember when I was working in a hardware store, which we'll address in a minute, was the Old Lyme Inn, and that was the the Barbizon when I was a kid, and they had a major fire during the day on the south end of the building, which was pretty devastating at the time. And unfortunately, at that time, I wasn't a fireman, but that's one of the reasons maybe I did start, and I'll mention that a bit. And across the street from the hardware store on Halls Road, they were putting up Chapman's Shopping Center. And two things I remember about that was they had the trusses all up, or most of them up. They went for lunch and they didn't secure them, and they were all back down when they got back from lunch. So there's some embarrassment there. But you know, they rebuilt it, and I think next key thing when I was in the fire department is I was deputy chief, came around the corner from Post Road, and I could see the back of the building, probably was 50, 60 feet of flames. And I took a deep breath, went around and sized it up. By the time I got there, it was going through the roof, and kind of the rest is history. We couldn't save it. A couple of things with that is, other than spending the whole night there, is 2 weeks after that, we had a new truck coming that had 2,000 feet of 5-inch hose. The old truck that we used, the Ward France, had 2.5-inch hose. We had to hand lay one of the two, and then the other truck had to do two more that we could have taken care of most of that in a new truck. So the timing wasn't quite right.
Yeah.
other things on Halls Road that's gone down to the end. That Hallmark's Ice Cream was in the end going on to 156 on the left. And that was the place to go. Future, that became a lumber yard, and then kind of laid dormant. Now it's apartments, I guess, or business.
Is it that blue building on the corner?
Blue
Yeah,
building
I
on
think
the
it's like medical offices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And kind of address on the shopping center when you go down Lime Street. That's probably where I'd pick it up. New things that happened is obviously at the school, which was pretty neat to have a college type school in Old Lyme, which was neat. But going down Lime Street, things I remember is building the Old Lyme Fire Department, and they were housed underneath the town hall when I was a kid.
Mhm.